Nothing has come close to 2024 since 94.
The leadership of the party is not on board, and it's a ploy to get him out.
That's the title of this video, we must liberate it.
I never thought in my life I'd be sitting across with the VF+.
Welcome to coalition politics. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. Today I'm very glad to be joined by the chairperson of Action SA in Gauteng, Bongani Zakala Baloyi. Leadership, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me on the show, man. I think we need to throw in the horns as well for the type of intro.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. There we go.
Touch vibes. Bro, it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
You've been on SMWX before, one of the first people to acknowledge this platform, so we're glad to have you back. Yeah. But I really wanted to start in Joburg because Zakala in Joburg. Oh my goodness, this is going to be a good one, I can tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zakala, because there's so much going on, coalitions are coming together, they're breaking apart, new speaker, new mayor, and I find your voice interesting because you analyze politics in an interesting way. You're in the arena, but you also have an interesting analysis. Yeah. Can you help us understand what is going on in Joburg right now?
I think, firstly, 2021 elections delivered an interesting result. No one of the political parties have majority. So voters have forced us to find each other to build a coalition government. So that has delivered, in the first instance, where the Johannesburg mayor was elected without a coalition agreement. So many people don't appreciate that before they were elected, there was no coalition agreement.
Wow, so this famous agreement only came afterwards.
So the agreement comes after because the DA collapsed talks 2 days before the inaugural council meetings. And now when Mayor Palazzi was elected, she was shocked. Okay, now I'm here, I'm the mayor.
Wow.
First woman mayor for Johannesburg, fantastic, kudos to her. And now then they realize that how do you stabilize these governments? Because now you've got a DA mayor, DA speaker, DA chief whip of council, which are three leaders of three important institutions of council.
Sure.
So now they get elected and they realize we've got a responsibility to form a coalition. And then they put parties around the table, exclude the EFF that contributed in the vote. And that's a very important point that I want to really stress.
Please, explain that to us.
Without the vote of the EFF, there would have never been a successful coalition government that has been elected in all three municipalities. Well, Tshwane less role of an EFF, but in Ekurhuleni and City of Johannesburg, EFF was actually the party that voted for a vote determined who becomes the executive. And that's material and that's a fact of life we must live with, because we are comfortable in taking an EFF vote for nothing. And because it suits us, because EFF is put in a position where they're saying we are the better devil and they vote for us and get nothing out of it, and we thought that is the comfortable space for us to be in, but still let's keep demonizing them. And because we say they represent this evil and this collapse of society potentially when they come into power because of who they are and how they run their affairs. So, but we've been very happy to accept their votes because it served us. And behind closed doors, there's constant conversations with EFF, and nobody wants to own it in public to say, but we keep speaking to EFF to sustain these governments. So Johannesburg started with a fracture of the coalition. It's triggered by a number of things. It's triggered by our relationship with the DA, which is a very antagonistic relationship, and we're always trying to outdo each other. Number two, it's triggered by the DA's experience. They would say perceived arrogance, and we would say it's experienced arrogance, that they don't actually accommodate other parties. They believe in their minds this is a DA-led government. Meanwhile, it's a multi-party government. And when you make that fundamental distinction in an approach, it does an interesting thing in the mind. It introduces humility, and it opens up the mind to collaboration and consensus building, and also understanding that there must be some compromise made. So consensus, collaboration, compromise, those are very important things in a coalition. So there was genuine issues raised about the misperformance of the speaker in council, former speaker, Mr. Vasco, which led to with the council collapsing at key stages and being unruly.
I remember that there were like protests and people were like going and pretending to be in handcuffs and all of that at the council sitting.
Correct.
So from back there, that was when things started to...
Correct. So in my assessment now, I actually start to see that various forces who wanted to collapse the coalition waited for legitimate issues to arise within the coalition.
I see.
Now, the environment within the coalition was such that there was a voice of cope with one vote, which is Colleen Makubela, which had legitimate issues to raise against Vasco da Gama.
Right.
And her experience as a chair, relying on the speaker to appoint people and for specific programs she was running, and those not being supported, and her feeling isolated, and her feeling from her structures, why are you in this when we see no value for our party, at least our constituency being taken care of.
Sure.
So these are the things I can say without fear or favor, because I've had a difficult conversation with Colleen when all of this happening. And because I realized that in the coalition there was a narrative about her that was being sponsored, that she's an angry black woman. You know, it's so that's the easiest thing to put on anybody, and then everybody moves away from you.
Sure.
But I was curious because I didn't think that's justified, because who has had a conversation with her to understand her side? And I really think the coalition really mismanaged the coalition from that perspective, because we're quick to get to absolute points of view about people, and they're talking to the ANC, let's condemn them to the depths of the hell in this world, right? And I really think that was an immature way of dealing with the coalition. I think the coalition should have engaged immediately, called people around the table and said, you've got issues, let's resolve those issues. That would have given her the space to say what she needed to say, and for the coalition to actually deal with the substance of what she was saying. Never mind what then she did later. I may not agree with her, but I can appreciate its brilliance.
It's actually hard to think now that she was part of that. I didn't even think about her being part of that original coalition because of how things have flipped.
At this point.
Yeah.
So I think when I lose in situations, nothing stops me from still marveling at how I lost and how brilliant the other person was and how they moved. But how Colleen moved, I preempted it, and I told our guys that this is going to happen. We must intervene and don't cast an aspersion against her. Let's intervene decisively and deal with the substance of what she's raising to try and resolve that internally. At least if you open the door, there's still that conversation. That did not happen. Colleen was able to then start being engaged outside with other forces, using the legitimate things that she was raising that were not dealt with by the coalition. And I say this without having the view that I need to defend the coalition, because I also appreciate honesty in these conversations and self-reflecting, because if we don't do that, we'll project this image about this coalition that it has not made mistakes and it does not take blame for what has transpired, that is someone else's responsibility, but never how we dealt with this. And I really think that we must be honest, because in Gauteng, at least, we're investing in the institution of coalitions, and if we don't, from a recognition point of view, learn from these things and be honest about them, there's no value in them that you have learned, and people can get assurance that you have learned indeed. So Colleen then mobilized outside, found friendly forces outside, and because she was being demonized, it also built momentum for her on the other side. And we did not deal with it properly, and we underestimated her as well. And she had she's got an enormous and tremendous fighting spirit. So the worst of all, she had to prove to people that she's not just an angry black woman and this tag being stuck to her, but she's got substance, and her party, and fractured as it is, there's a faction that backs her, and you can't just fire her. You have to deal with her. And now she's back, and I said to people before, there's two eventualities here. One is that the COPE fires her, she goes away. Number two is that they can't fire her and then she's still there. Are you going to keep demonizing her? At some stage there must be mature heads that say, let's engage and let's find each other. But alas, we are here now. It did not happen. So then mobilized outside, there's the election of the speaker, which started to confirm what would happen. And she was elected as speaker in council. And then there was an election, a vote of no confidence on the mayor, a contested process, legally so. And for me, I think the DA is right in pursuing the legal principle, just to confirm to all of us in terms of the law how things must happen. But they won't win the battle because PA has moved over. Now let's go back and ask the question: how does PA move over?
Yeah, that's also, so we've got Cope and Colleen Makubela now, Speaker, as a key person who gets alienated in some ways. Yeah, PA.
So in the conversation, when there's a vacancy of Speaker, we then say to the DA, now is the time to remedy the imbalance.
Yeah.
In terms of the coalition agreement, IFP should hold the position of MPEC chair. That position is held by UDM, not IFP.
Okay.
So if we regard a agreement as sacrosanct, why don't we deal with this? And then we said, let's remedy it. Because I'm also aware of what is happening around and people speaking to different parties.
Sure.
And I'm seeing an opportunity for us to deepen the participation of IFP into this coalition and PA as well. So we make the proposal to the multi-party coalition, which is rejected by DA but accepted by everybody. And the DA says the coalition agreement with science says we are entitled to this position and we can amend this ad hoc as and when. And we're saying, but that's not the question.
Yeah.
The question is that we've got an opportunity now to deepen participation and stabilize coalition and guarantee that this coalition lasts for a longer period of time. What makes this difficult is that you're working with many parties.
Sure.
It's the DA, IFP, VF Plus. I never thought in my life I'd be sitting across with the VF Plus, having a conversation about governing.
Welcome to coalition politics.
It's the most awkward thing for me because of how I've understood their politics and how I never thought there would be a point of meeting of the minds about what we do.
Have you seen that with them? Have you been able to actually find pragmatic common ground?
They're very pragmatic.
Interesting.
They in fact, it's one party that is more about how do we stabilize the coalition than most parties.
Wow.
It's the party that's always in the center. It's the party that must draw people to the center. Yeah. And for me, that's a strange thing.
That's so funny, yeah.
So I've had to deal with this thing, and my political background and my understanding of their politics, I never thought I'd be sitting around, but this is politics.
Yeah,
these things happen. So we raised the point, even Freedom Front Plus supports it, and the DA declines. So when we are still persuading them, they decline, and we accept because it's not a majority thing. It has to be a consensus part.
Right.
We accept that we've lost that argument and that we are unable to persuade the DA because the question they're responding to is a selfish question, not about the coalition. It's about a position they believe is theirs, they're entitled to.
Can I ask you a question before you carry on with the narrative? Do you think that had the DA been more flexible in that moment and brought the IFP in, we would be in a different situation now? It would have
made the position that PA would have taken a far more difficult position to take. And PA was looking for an excuse to exit, and we gave them that excuse to exit.
Sure.
So we would have actually trapped PA in the coalition and then said, you want to get more positions, let's embark on a process. Because what the positions you are speaking about are positions for which at this stage there's no vacancy. Yeah. Now it requires us to do an evaluation of the entire executive and have that conversation because we still wanted to ventilate why would they have an interest into a particular department and not the other. Yeah, exactly. And they would have been under serious public pressure if they alone just went with the ANC. Absolutely, for no reason at all, apart from their gain. So the DA's insistence and arrogance, I mean, on the eve of such a conversation where all parties had agreed that we accept the DA's position, we're still going to remain in the coalition and vote. On the eve when we were meeting at 9 o'clock, when parties also decided to go and brief their executives and then come back at 10 o'clock in the evening. 9:30, the DA publishes an opinion piece by Mr. Solim Simang, where he characterizes,
this is the famous,
where he characterizes all of us as rent seekers, minnow parties, and parties driven by greed, and parties who think coalitions, who treat coalitions like children in a playground exchanging new toys. Now all of us are thinking, but we don't understand because we've raised valid inputs. So when you're saying we can't, an agreement is an agreement, you're presenting to the public the perception perception that we don't honor agreements. Meanwhile, the very same agreement has a clause to amend the agreement, and the agreement has already been amended twice by the DA to bring in the PA1 and to also deal with Tshwane, where in Tshwane we removed the speaker, which was a DA speaker, and installed a COPE speaker. So what we were trying to do in Johannesburg has been done in Tshwane successfully. But now there's this narrative being pushed. So at that point, we really felt defeated to saying, but how can you at this point, when all of us have accepted, have debated, and now you characterize us the way you do? That was the final nail in that broke the deal, and which gave PA the excuse they wanted. So DA served this on a silver platter for that. And in my view, never mind our antagonistic relationship, which compromised the coalition, presented the impression that it's not stable, that we're all immature, just fighting each other, notwithstanding the obvious fact that some of us are from there and it's perceived as personal fights as well, which has muddied the waters, and we forgot what the main thing is. And I think the DA situation has really turned to an ugly situation, and we must really reflect about how do we deal with some of the lies that they speak about, but at the same time, how do we, as a coalition bloc, present to South African stability from a coalition bloc? And I think that's one of three choices Action SA has, and we can get to that the other two choices, and we can expand on a bit later. But that's how then ultimately PA walked out. They voted for the ANC. We voted for the DA candidate. And when we got to council, we saw that the PA has gone. What's the point? And sometimes I struggle when people know that they don't have the votes, but they still want to contest. I don't understand those battles. When you see that you don't have the votes but you still want to contest, what are you contesting for? Because the contest is not a substantive matter, it's a vote, it's numbers.
Sure.
So what point are you trying to make that you lost for record of history? So I struggle with things like that. So for us, we pursued an approach to say, let's quickly accept. Let's accept democracy. Let's accept your opposition. Now the question is, what are we going to do when you're in opposition? And by the way, I like to remind our councillors and our structures that we have projected over and above the majority, the number of seats we have. We have over-projected, and in Johannesburg we are below 19%, in Tshwane we are below 8%, in Ekurhuleni we are below 8% as well. That's the votes. So sometimes when you listen to us in public, you would imagine that Action SA holds a far higher number.
Sure.
But in reality, we must utilize this 18%, this 9%, the 7% to grow. And we must realize that we can actually persuade where government goes and how stable it becomes. The lessons from the PA situation and the COPE situation is that the coalition bloc will remain unstable.
As long as you have those small tipping the scales parties that can go anyway, and you can promise those parties the world. The party out of power will promise them the world plus one.
Yeah.
And that can constantly happen to and fro for years. Yeah.
And for me, I've got a serious problem with accepting that our future will be determined. Well, firstly, I don't have money to go anywhere else when the country goes belly. So I can go to Limpopo in my father's village, I can go to KZN in my mother's village, but I'm stuck here. So I'm very uncomfortable with the approach that says, let's hold back and let's let these thieves, because we've characterized them as good and evil. Let's let the forces of evil continue. By the way, the very same forces of evil have a legitimate reason to be in these councils. Majority of the wards in Johannesburg voted for ANC ward councillors.
Sure.
We may not like them, but we must not forget who they represent and how they actually still have majority. Maybe not in council to constitute an executive alone, but the majority of the votes in black areas specifically. And that's something, whether we like to or we don't, we must remember. And because they represent that constituency, we represent a constituency in the same area. So it's important for us to say, how do you stabilize government? When you move and there's a fluctuation, 6 months is this coalition bloc, 6 months is this coalition bloc, for me it does not make any sense.
Look, I agree, and this is one of the things I was interested in. Was I saw that you then convened So I'm watching Action SA with some interest because I'm seeing you doing things differently to other parties. So firstly, I'm seeing you convening and talking openly about, okay, maybe we made an error here, maybe we're going to rethink. You don't hear that language very often, especially not so soon after something's happened. And then you say, we're actually going to go out and speak to people and see what they think, which again is like, wow, okay, that's quite refreshing.
Yeah.
But when you say you're going to rethink the coalitions, in practical terms, does that mean, okay, we're going to think about potentially partnering with the ANC where we can say, look, we want this to be stable, these are our demands, or does it mean something different? And I don't, I think South Africans are actually smart enough to realize the difficult positions in which parties are in.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help to pretend like you're doing one thing and then you do the other, like some parties do.
We must be clear.
Yeah, and look, every party is going to have to go back on what they said they were going to do in coalition politics. So I'm interested in what the review was like going through that and what it means going forward for what you are prepared to do in a place like Gauteng and the different cities.
Well, the review is still not complete for another week. It will close, I think, next week, Friday, with all the inputs being consolidated.
Yeah.
And that will be very interesting because the review itself, while it's still going, our president has also made his views public, which has an interesting effect into the review.
Sure.
People are scared, and then it presents an image that people like me are meeting secretly with the ANC, and our party is not, our leadership of the party is not on board, and it's a ploy to get him out, which is a really nonsense type of narrative, because these things would not happen without buy-in from a senior level.
Sure.
So us going to Senate to say, let's review, is because we believe the current situation is not working. The current coalition is not holding. There's too many parties. Small parties are detrimental to the coalition because they're moving. So, and I suggested strongly to Senate that maybe we're trying to respond to the wrong question. There's two questions here. One is, what is in the interest of Action SA? The second one is, what is in the interest of residents? So if it's in the interest of Action SA to sit back and say, we don't want to taint our brand and name, we'll just sit this one back. We want voters to see that, you see, this is the consequence of voting in this manner. And that's actually scenario one of the scenarios I spoke about earlier. Scenario one is saying to voters, you have put us in this situation, this is what it means to vote incorrectly, but there's also reneging on our responsibility in a representative democracy to represent people by using the 20%, the 18%, the 5% they gave us to do something in their interest with. And not everybody may appreciate and understand that. And that inherently that's filled with contradictions then. So scenario one, we sit back and watch. Pull out of all coalitions, sit back and watch and get our hands clean. And then start pointing, you are wrong, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. If you want to, your budget approved, tough luck, we'll see, with issue by issue basis. That's scenario one. Scenario two is a very difficult scenario. The way we as Action SA say, let's stop this fight with the DA. Let's stop fighting opposition. Let's actually consolidate the opposition bloc. Helen Zille has spoken about this in many scenarios. And I think it's a pity for DA because the Helen Zille you need now in the helm of the DA is the Helen Zille between 2013 and 2016. What she tried to do there with consolidating the opposition, I think was probably a few years too early. This is the time for that Helen Zille, because she was moving in a very futuristic way, in my view. I mean, it was master strokes that she was trying to do, but the environment was not right then. The environment for that type of moves is actually now, which speaks to scenario two, where there's a consolidation of all oppositions which can work with each other and reaching consensus, because the question is, how do you defeat this big bad wolf being the ANC? So do we fragment? Do we fight for the same vote base and we kill each other? other, or do we consolidate?
Yeah.
And I'm not too sure what that consolidation may mean at this stage. Could it mean a merger into one thing? She would be open to that because she tried that once with the ID, COPE, and Ahang. So she was someone who was actually saw the future and that actually we are better and stronger together. But I don't think she'll do that now.
Whoa, that's an interesting idea, but that I haven't, I didn't realize was even possible, would be a combined force going into 2024, for example.
Absolutely.
That could actually govern. That could get a majority,
But potentially.
where the ANC is.
I mean, imagine DA, Action SA, Freedom Front, IFP. And the type of consensus to do this would need to be important because it's about what do you do? Is it a merger? How do we legally constitute such a thing? But I think the principle, it's something that in my mind I believe is a real I think there's only 3 real choices. The rest are false choices.
Yeah.
Scenario 1 relates to those choices.
Sure.
What do you do then?
Yeah.
So it requires us to bury the hatchet and accept that we'll have to sit in the same room with Helen Zille and former DA colleagues and Freedom Front and IFP about what do we do.
And somehow find
each other. I think that's something many people will find palatable.
Within that scenario, there are also two variants, as it were. There's one where it's an official new thing, and there's one where you retain your respective identities, but you cooperate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it requires the best thing in that variant is actually one thing.
Yeah.
A merger would make sense to me of all of these forces towards one thing.
It would actually send a message like we are now serious about unseating the ANC.
Absolutely. So that's the first scenario in my mind. Second scenario. I've spoken about the first scenario, which is pull back and
laugh, ha.
Correct.
Point fingers.
Correct.
Keep your brand identity clean.
Correct. The third scenario is saying how do we stabilize these metros?
Sure.
And to go full and not half-hearted Mickey Mouse business, then we would say we recognize that as Action SA 1, we're a party just over 2 years. We already have some record in governance. Potentially, we could actually get to govern a metro and stabilize in a potentially 3-way alliance. So how do you rope in the DA in a conversation with the ANC? Then it would potentially become Action SA, DA, and ANC. If that does not work, the next 3 to consider is Action SA, EFF, and ANC, and we stabilize the entire province at the 3-way alliance. So then we accept that we have to, along this path to get to a prince, we need to kiss a few frogs along the way. But ultimately what that does is reduces space for small parties, and it stabilizes that, and it becomes the image or the new form of a coalition or co-governance model, whatever you call it. And that's the potential of that introduces stability, start projecting for the future. Because in this case, then you accept that in whatever alliance formation, ANC must be present, because then it presents an issue of relative stability because of numbers that they bring, and how you then start speaking about the future. It may be of Action SA's interest to consider this, notwithstanding what our party president is saying. If we did not have such a position in the party, what it would open up to is a potential to start building towards type of strong positions that we can negotiate with the ANC in 2024 around economic issues, justice, rule of law, and various other things as well, because an ANC below 50% still has a great majority, and I don't see them dropping below 40%. Maybe that's the realist in me, but others may be optimistic and think the challenges we face now will warrant a significant and drastic turn of events, but they will still remain a dominant fact. And I think coming to an understanding about an economic policy will work better if it's ourselves, the DA and the ANC. It will be far more difficult trying to find an agreement on economic policy with EFF, PAID, IFP, Freedom Front, and. And
any of those pieces can move at any given
point in time. So that's stability. My personal view is that the scenarios to consider, the choices is the second one, which is a consolidation of opposition.
Yeah.
And we must be clear about that. Number two is a co-governance agreement. And the most stable module or approach for that, or players, is actually ourselves, the DA and the ANC. Notwithstanding all of what we've been saying in the media, my personal view is that those two scenarios give us stability and rescues the country, because the scenario we're saying, let's show the voters what they have done, is actually irresponsible. And just sitting back and watching all of this move in the manner that it's moving is actually equally irresponsible as well, because there are millions of South Africans who are below the poverty line who cannot even decide what to eat today because of nothing in their hands to put on the table. And those people do not have the choices that the middle class may have necessarily when things go bad. And when there's fluidity of government and you're changing of mayors, what it means actually is that you destabilize government, you create instability in the ecosystem of governance, where you create the environment for thieves to keep stealing. And when they do, ultimately those who suffer the most in a disproportionate manner is the poorest of the poor, who need intervention of government. And once we do that, it will be difficult to arrest the decline of governance, because once there's an ecosystem, professional staff start moving away, there's no respect for systems, processes, and internal environment, it just collapses in a spectacular way. And that eventuality, in as much as it's very extreme, for me is something I'm guarding against, because I think I still have about 50 years left here. So there's something to fight for. And I hope these views I'm sharing here could be things that people consider, even in our party as well, and also externally, because much as we dislike each other with the DA, and that there's a shared future to some extent, where we need to find each other one way or another, and it requires us coming of minds. And also it's important to have a conversation with the ANC about that eventuality. And it's good that the senator said to speak to everybody, and speaking to everybody will understand everybody, because it's beyond just ourselves. We need to have an understanding. And what happens when an ANC mayor comes to us with a budget proposal where he said, I've included all of your priorities in your manifesto. Are you going to support the budget? Are we then going to say, because it's ANC, we are going to say no all the time? What happens to our constituents we want to service? So I think we need to move towards maturity and stability and removal of emotions, to understand that ultimately when we define the positions we hold, ultimately there are people who, not like people who are on Twitter who tweet for the sake, but there are people who rely heavily on stability.
That's true. And I have to admit, as a resident of Joburg, right, look, obviously things aren't perfect, but shame, you could see someone was at least trying to do basics in this coalition period. Like, there were some potholes that were there for 3 years that, 3 months they got fixed. I saw on highways, like, weeding was actually happening. I saw parts of the ground that haven't seen the light since who knows when. So you got a sense, even though things were messy, that there was some fundamental attempt to deliver. And that was refreshing, and you realized how quickly things can turn around.
Absolutely. When
you actually have a stable coalition that wants to deliver rather than so it's going to be interesting. All three scenarios have risks and rewards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The one that just interests me is Action SA, EFF, and ANC. I think it's probably one of the least likely ones, but that would it would almost confuse people into, because on the one hand you then, I think what Action SA brings to something like that is good governance. You've got people in there who people, for some reason, trust to be able to govern. I mean, your track record speaks for itself, etc. There's Ethel Trollip there, Mashaba did a decent job as mayor. But then you are then able to bring in a more radical voter base to support the city. Of course, the DA will shout from the rooftops if that happens and brand you as all one and the same.
But we must liberate the DA, and we must liberate ourselves.
I think that's the title of this video. We must liberate the
we must, and ourselves as well, because for the good of the best scenario under the circumstances is Action SA, DA, and ANC. That's the best scenario.
That's certainly the most stable.
Correct.
Yeah.
And this is my personal view, by the way. The next best scenario, if that first one does not work, and you are following the same principle of stability and least amount of parties involved, then presents Action SA, EFF, and the ANC, which potentially is unlikely. And the fact that you throw in Action SA and ANC there already starts your problem. So even in the conversations we're having, it definitely can't result in a coalition or whatever that you would call it. It has to speak about how do we sustain that part. And I think it's a step in the right direction, but if we did not have fears and various other thinking, would go to the most extreme and actually get to that point. But now we're still trying to protect our brand, and I appreciate our party president and the view of Senate in moving there, because something so significant you have to go down gradually and see first, have conversations, let's conclude our review, let's make a determination. But my view is that we've got those scenarios, and unfortunately the DA is a prominent player in these scenarios, one way or the other, and the ANC is a prominent player in these scenarios. And if we can't get the two in one place, then we must consider the other. If all else was equal, and one could put that together, I would persuade heavily for that.
And how soon do you think, so if you conclude your review, do you think that there's a chance that we might see another changeover in government? Or do you think it might come too late and that we are stuck with what we have for now?
I think it's less likely that it would stimulate a change in government. It's more likely to reflect on current reality and how to stabilize. Because even if we were to think Ekurhuleni as an example, it's a minority government. So without EFF voting for this government, there won't be a government, because if EFF and ANC vote together, they've got majority and then can constitute a new government. But at the same time, we've been all too happy to accept the EFF's vote, and our appreciation of them has always been to the extent of their vote and not anything else. And from what I gather now, they've got an interest to govern. They've got in as much as a legitimate reason as all of us. Never mind our fears, but they've got a legitimate reason to do so. And what that would mean is subject to interpretations and permutations of the future. But now they realize that they want to govern as well. They're preparing themselves for the future. They've got a legitimate right to say so. And whoever engages in them in that way will appreciate that EFF support is subject to support for them to govern as well. So there's the period for them for votes for nothing has come to an end, according to my understanding. And now this informs us to then say, what do we do? This is the reality. We can play with realities in our minds of a perfect world where there's no contradictions, and then we've got reality. And unfortunately, how we respond will be determined by what question we ask. Is it about party existence and good for the brand of the party, or is it about good for the country? And I think good for the country is also good for the brand of the party as well. I mean, the two work together, but if we insist on one over a period of time, we'll start to see. And I think the EFF example is clear to me that they've reached an understanding that now they've stagnated. They've done everything possible, and they've sustained and stagnated to an extent that they're not growing. But now they realize for us to get sporadic growth, we need government. And for us as a new player, we must not close our eyes to this lesson. That there's a point where you stop. And when the point where you need to be in government to show people your delivery, and this gets more people to vote for you. And at what point do we do that? And that speaks to part of these scenarios of holding back, being part of something, because that speaks to growth. You may upset a few people initially, but delivery
Yeah.
And stability and projection in government will help you grow far more better. And I think I'm appreciating that with the EFF conundrum that they face, because it's a lesson we don't need to go and pay school fees for.
I mean, all of this is really interesting in the lead up, of course, to the big one, which is 2024. You know, and there's so many potential options, you know, going into that election. How are you feeling ahead of 2024, and what at this point would be a good outcome, you know, for you, but also for the country? And you've already alluded to the fact that you think that, look, the ANC is not going anywhere. So how are you thinking about that key moment in all of our lives? Because I think that nothing has come close to 2024 since '94.
Look, I am excited and nervous as well, because I appreciate that it's our, as Prince Mashele says, our second political transition since 1994. So what that will mean physically, it will be uncertainty, anxiety, and disruption. And hopefully it settles. So ANC will definitely be below 50%. Action SA will come into the fore with a reasonable number, and then we start negotiating with partners across the table. And I hope one way or another, one thing I can tell you it will be effect is that a coalition will lead the Gauteng province, whether it's an ANC-led coalition and opposition-led coalition, or if potentially an ANC and some people, some other parties, and we still will have a few political parties. I mean, the episode from last week, my former colleague, my friend Ghana, was very clear.
Yes.
Even though he stopped short to confirm what we all know, that there will be other players in this space. So there still will be fluidity in this space, but it will result into I hope it will stimulate the electorate and ignite their imagination and get them to consider strongly voting, because it's now options and the space will be fluid. I hope it doesn't stimulate despondence again and people just sit. So it's exciting. I hope that the ANC will be out of there, and if they are there, it will be a coalition. But I really hope, I think for my own personal ambition, hopefully to become Premier of Gauteng, because we've been clear in the approach we're taking as a party and how we want to pursue. So if we do our part well and really capture the imagination of South Africans, and project an election campaign that is vote for something, not against something. We need to vote for something here. It's no longer a space where you vote for Mandela. Me personally, I don't know Mandela, so I'll never go and do something for somebody I don't know. So I'm going to be personal. Vote for my children here. Vote for your future, for people who will be able to deal with the very complex environment we find ourselves in. Our leaders are still stuck, current leaders, the ANC predominantly in other parties. Their best days is their past. They live with a sense of nostalgia all the time. The best days. I want my best days to be ahead of me, not back then. So I really hope we can convey that message to people about the prosperity of their future and the work that needs to happen. And a big part of that message is reorientating South Africans to law and order. I mean, you can't build a society without law and order. And all of us can blame SABS, but how many of us bribe police, and how many of us are so inclined when there's a problem to want to initiate a bribe? And that speaks to this type of society where law and order has completely been eroded.
So we are currently speaking to the potential future premier here. Now so many things come to my mind, because now I'm already thinking of how the provincial and the national, you could say to the ANC, okay, give us Gauteng to govern ourselves, and then we'll be amenable to but look, there are thousands of scenarios we can go into, but there's this conundrum that I want to put to you, which I've been thinking, because I've thought through, and then I want to put a scenario to you, since we're on the topic of scenarios, right? So the conundrum is, we all, basically, if you're a sane South African, you want to send a message to the ANC that this is intolerable and you deserve to lose power, right? But then you turn around and you say, what if the DA is the second biggest party and the logical president of South Africa right, would be John Steenhuisen. But I mean, that's
Unlikely.
Okay, so one thing I was thinking of, because I was like,
Gordon Hill may probably be the leader of DA at that point.
you see, no one has pointed this out, and I was thinking about this the other day, because I was like, how often are DA congresses? So you think the DA will go to a leadership congress
Yes.
before 2024?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's interesting. And it would make sense, because it has to be 3 years or something.
Next year, May.
Oh, okay. You see, that's why I say we've got the political analyst in the house. Okay. Hey, you're giving us, okay. Next year, May. But even then,
Yes.
Gordon Hill Lewis, right? Quite impressed by the work he's doing in Cape Town. Are we ready for a white man from the DA that doesn't have a majority? Look, if they get a majority in an election, then you say you're a leader. But are we going to pluck Steenhuisen or Gordon Hill Lewis and put them in the union buildings to send that message to the ANC?
That is a likely scenario. And telling ourselves that it won't happen, whoever is leading the DA at that stage, whether they happen to be white or not, can actually happen as a consequence of the socio-economic environment we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
So that is a possibility that could happen. And that's what makes us as Action SA to say, what are we going to do to upset that scenario and put ourselves in a stronger position? And that's why when Herman, our president, said, let's grow the party in the entire country.
Yeah, sure.
Let's have provincial chairpersons, even though initially we are appointing them. After elections, we'll go through our internal elections, which is strategic, remove conflict and internal contestation to focus on the election. So now we are growing in Musina, we are growing in Palabora, we are growing Wanongoma, Zululand, in places where, when I was previously with the DA, it was difficult to grow and penetrate. You go into those areas, people have material of the party.
Yeah.
So for us, the push to move towards a direction is to fight that likely scenario. Sure. So we put ourselves in a position where people rather say, the scenario may well be that Herman Mashaba is the leader of the second biggest party in the country. Imagine Herman as a president of the country, which triggers his various...
That's the logical other... I mean, if we really sit back, there are three options, right? It's either going to be the leader of the DA, the leader of Action SA, or, and this is much less likely, the leader of the EFF, right? If it's going to be an opposition coalition. I don't see anyone bursting onto the scene to overtake all three of those parties. So
I don't see my money doing that. I don't see Mr. Zibi doing that.
Sure. You know, so, and this thing is tough, hey? This politics thing is very tough. So ultimately there's going to have to, and I'm hoping you're all thinking about this, you know, now, but you're going to have to present the country with someone, if in that scenario, someone that we can believe in sufficiently that the ANC does not look like a preferable option. And we can't ignore that President Ramaphosa, for all his follies, still is quite a popular person, still somehow retains some air of respectability, you know. So how do you navigate around that difficulty?
Scenario 2 with the mobilizing of the entire coalition can sufficiently deal with that, because the coalition can then say, as a coalition bloc, this is our cabinet. Never mind just president, but they can present an entire executive and say, nationally, this is our aim. So that can actually effectively deal with that picture at a national level. But the other two scenarios makes it difficult, because it's everybody for themselves, and the everybody for themselves with the type of ANC that we have is actually the best thing for the ANC. They get to negotiate with a plethora of political parties, with one-seat parties, etc. But I think the best way of dealing with that is scenario 2, mobilizing and organizing the entire coalition bloc.
The other thing I thought, and I want to put this to you, is that there's a potential deal which can be struck, which is that we often see coalitions at the moment as just executive coalitions, so who governs the executive. But of course, there's also the legislature at the moment. So you could live in a world where, okay, there's one coalition which runs the executive, and another group of parties separate will hold that executive to account in Parliament. So you could say, okay, look, Action SA, ANC and DA will govern the executive, split cabinet and whatever. EFF and other parties, you hold us accountable. And in that way, then you don't have a weak parliament that just rubber stamps everything like we've already seen. You actually have a parliament whose incentive is to hold the...
That will be a very good model for multi-party democracy in the executive and legislative. So I did not expand a bit on the metros in the event it was ANC, DA, and Action SA. What that would have meant is that, for an example, Johannesburg is run by, in the executive, the ANC, and in the oversight, the speaker would be taken by a different party. The oversight will be all different political parties in that space. So that balances that equation as well. So I think that's an appropriate mechanism, because this single party dominance is not good. We've seen it.
Imagine you have an EFF speaker and you say, okay, you control Parliament now.
Now they must keep themselves in check.
Exactly. Then
there's strategy and tactics would need to change.
Completely.
It would need to then orientate themselves in a new reality. And what does that mean for law and order? And maintaining decorum. So now those who have challenged that decorum and practices and what was normal in that environment must now protect that institution of apartheid as they see them. That would be an interesting...
2024 is going to be a fun one. That's for
absolutely
sure.
No exciting times ahead.
Can we talk about your decision to leave the DA? Talk us through just what that was like, how you came to that decision yourself, and what it's like to leave one political party and start something new.
It's a difficult process to leave a political party. The last part of leaving a political party people see is a physical move. You've got the emotional detachment, where you go through a lot of changes in the party which then shake your foundation of why you are here, because it's tied to aspirations of the party. And then you get the sense that, in my view, I got the sense more so with the Helen Zille Mmusi Maimane period, and having been a member of the Federal Council when Mmusi Maimane was leading and building up to, I started to see the bombs being laid for him. Already a year before elections, already people were starting to say, who will be blamed when we lose seats? Already that was the main thing at every federal council. And you can see the fractures behind his faction and people he worked with, John Steenhuisen and the number of people who he put around him to support him, and what that meant. And I felt the progressive agenda was still in the center of how do we move society, non-racialism, and move society progressively together. And I really felt we were the best chance under that environment, and the type of tone the DA had at that stage really resonated with a number of people, gave hope. And even though you still had the issue of a white party tag, you could still respond decisively, and how they were really intentional about development of black leaders in a very substantive way. I'm myself one of those, so there's a number of people in my cohort who were really, where the party spent time in thinking carefully about these things.
I often think, had you been able to keep that coalition of people together, from Mashaba to Delil, you, Maimane, you would probably be in a position to govern in 2024.
Absolutely.
You would have won this election,
Absolutely. I think we would have been in a very strong position. But I also felt that there were things that we were not privy to that shook the core of these factions, and then what we saw was the manifestations of it, and not really understanding, but what is Mmusi fighting here? We can see there's issues of, is it control? Is he trying to establish himself? Is he trying to fundamentally move the party in other direction? And you see the difficulty that he made, and I was very clear, in my mind, or very suspicious at least, when you take over political office and you retain your predecessors' support staff, I've got issues there, because you must be given the space to shape the party, you may make the case that let's stabilize first, later let's integrate.
Sure.
But when you keep the backbone and your key advisors, so that person that you took over from is your predecessor is still there. So it casts aspersions that is he really himself, is he really leading? So that thing was always present, and unfortunately he has then to assimilate and prove himself over a period of time.
And the irony is if they had just let him be himself
from the onset,
then the party would have been much more popular, because suddenly when he was himself, everyone was like, oh, I like this Musi. I didn't know this was actually Musi.
Correct. And now we were all surprised when Musi was saying things that people appreciate, that so white superiority, supremacists and superiority, and we're saying, hey, he can say these things, can't he? And we're saying, no, but Kubega, go deeper, Papa. And then he walks it back immediately. There's pressure, he cowers to pressure. And then there are moments when you think, no, man, sustain this thing.
Yeah.
You before you change externally, you must change fundamentally internally, and you as the leader have that responsibility. So that did not happen. It ended in a spectacular fashion, and I had to question myself, and what do I do now? Because I no longer see myself, when I look at what this party now has become, I no longer have confidence in the leaders, and I don't see myself in this party going to a particular direction. I no longer see my path here.
Sure.
So what kept me longer than should have was my office, the executive mayor office. So I still believe that it was the best thing for me to hold it out for 2 years and finish what I started, because that's a public record, and their voters really voted for their mayor there. I mean, when I came in as mayor, the majority in 2013 was 54%. In 2016, we took it to 59%, and when I left, we took it to 62%. So
those
my
are some
10 years.
achy numbers.
No, absolutely. Was when everyone was going down, this is the only municipality that's ran by the DA that went and sustained its trajectory. Even Cape Town dropped a bit. So that spoke about what we're able to do there. So for me, it was important to live on those bases. And equally, when I left, it had to be an amicable split, but very public split, because I'm preparing for the next chapter of my life. And we had conversations with John Steenes and Helen Ziller, but I'm glad that it reached the type of outcome it did, because I was having those conversations because I had started it.
Sure.
And we never mind whether I'd initiate or they initiate, but something was not closed, and it's difficult for me as a matter of principle to move without closing a thing. So we had those conversations, didn't find each other, and I was happy with how it ended, because I was able to move on to the next thing. And I left Medval, my term ended in Medval, and I had the best time. I mean, that gave me the governance platform and the foundation for me to learn and be able to get to this position that I'm in. And I'm forever grateful to the team I worked with, the former colleagues I worked with. But now it's about me. As an individual, as a leader, as a responsible adult, what do I do now? And sometimes people don't appreciate that we may work together for 10 years. I may decide tomorrow to move in a different direction. And it's nothing personal. Sure. It's just personal preference and where my life is going. So then I ventured into that space. I no longer felt that the DA represented my aspirations, that I could continue with them in their approach, and that they can potentially become the alternative for the future. Musi, to me, when he was there in Lindiwe, represented that. I really felt that. So when their era came to an end, it was time for me to look beyond. And the first choice for me was business. I had some really exciting business offers in the private sector. And while I was still applying my mind with those, then Action SA came to the table, and we started talking. But before that, we've been talking with Herman for 2 years. He's been trying to recruit me for that period. And I said, no, I must finish what I've started. It's an important thing, because one thing I battled with as a young person is starting something, not finishing, starting, not finishing. And it was important for me to finish and break that cycle of starting things, not finishing things. And for me, it was a very important milestone in my mind, and to say to myself, I've done this thing. I mean, I was in a space for 10 full years, 8 of those years as the executive mayor, and my record is clean. And I've done things that other people are not able to achieve, and I've been able to equally leave when I wanted to leave at my best period. And yeah, I'm very fortunate and extremely would be grateful to the DA, to the colleagues, and the residents of Medval really supported me through and through. I mean, that relationship is still strong till this day.
Well, I look forward to further conversations. I think certainly building up to 2024, it'll be interesting to understand your vision for the province, what you believe can be done. But for now, I think we've exploited your time sufficiently. So thanks very much for joining us, and all the best for the future.
No, thank you so much. I really enjoy these conversations. They're very important. We learn every day, and I think it's important for politicians, at least in our breed of politicians in this time and space, to always reflect, be honest with the public, engage the public, even with things that the public don't agree and appreciate.
Sure.
But the fact that they are able to understand honestly what we are trying to do is very important for me.
Yeah.
And how they react, whether they like it or don't, but they at least have the opportunity to have their say. And I really appreciate this platform gives us those opportunities to speak honestly and share what we really think.
We appreciate it.
Amen.
So we'll come and interview you next in the Premier's residence.
There's no longer Premier's residence. It will be in the Premier's office.
Very good. Fair enough. I hear you. But that could well drive the EFF into the arms of the ANC in 2024.
I was labelled desperate.
That opening quote is quite dramatic.
I didn't even look at it. I didn't care to look at it. I just wanted to know what the verdict was.
The DA might be criticized for giving us the ANC again.
I worry about the possibility of an ANC-EFF national government.
You just can't script South African politics sometimes. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. And today I'm very excited to be speaking to the current mayor of Johannesburg, Dr. Mpofu-Walsh. Dr. Walsh, thank you very much for coming on SMWX.
Thank you. It feels weird when you call me the current mayor, because for the last 3 weeks, everyone was calling me former mayor. And I was like, I'm not so sure, but it's okay for now. So, yes.
It's a kind of interesting lesson in the way that political office moves when you're in this game.
I guess so. I mean, it's a rude awakening. I don't think that anyone goes into office preparing for such turbulence and uncertainty. I think when you go in with a vision and you think you're just going to go in and roll it out. But there's so many moving parts, and it is what it is.
What's it felt like? What did it feel like? Take us into, what it's like to be mayor one day, not mayor the next, and then mayor again. What's it actually been like on a personal level?
I actually don't think I've had time to process, because, from the day we were ousted, there was a battle. And it was first the legal battle and then the political battle. I don't think I've had time for Mpo. And I just had to get on with the battle, and get on with the business of winning the city back. So it's been hectic. We had to sit, strategize, look at what was done wrong and how we're going to approach the legal battle. I had a lot of support from the Democratic Alliance. They made a legal team available and resources and so on. So that was really great. And and we set up a war room here, and we had a whole fight back campaign with our councillors and activists. So it was good in that sense. It brought us together. It gave us a reason to, push for something and fight for something. And when we won, it was a huge relief, because as much as we knew we had a good case, you just never know, especially with the judicial system. So it was really a huge relief. I think it was affirming, for us, and also just in terms of the country's own state, the state of the judiciary and its independence. And I was really encouraged by the win. But as you know, the legal battle is not the only battle. So there's still the political battle. So even with the win, and I was chatting with one of our councillors yesterday, and she was like, "Have you celebrated?" And I'm like, minimally, because there's always that, what if you're out again in the next few days? And there's already another motion that's being tabled. As we speak, there's a programming meeting that's sitting this afternoon to consider that motion. And they'll probably bring it to a council meeting next week sometime. So you're in limbo all the time. So it is quite unsettling, but even more so when you want to implement programs. Because I feel like even with officials, they're working, but they also also anticipating that there will be another disruption. So nobody's really settled, and I sense it because the momentum is not quite where I'd like it to be. But I have to be sensitive as well to where people are, because it's real, and it's happening to them, and it's their workspace, and it's turbulent. I mean, think about the officials who were in a mayoral committee meeting that morning with the Dada Morero administration, and just after the opening remarks, they get a message, the court judgment is out, you are not the real mayoral committee, and then it's over, and then that evening at 6 o'clock, there's the real mayoral committee. Think about those officials, the city manager, the senior managers, so they're going through a lot, and I don't think we've all processed what we're going through.
Where were you when you heard the court judgment? Were you in the court, or did someone tell you about it, and what was that like?
So the judge gave us the option to either get it remotely through email or to come into court, should we so desire. But both parties felt there was no need. So I was actually at home. I got a message that it would come out around 9:30.
So you knew it was coming that day?
Yeah, I got the message. I believe I got it the night before or early that morning, I can't remember. But I had meetings in the morning, so online meetings, which I took from home, and I was sort of on the lookout. And as soon as it came through, I read through it. I went right to the end, so I didn't read through all the pages. I went right to the judgment itself.
That opening quote is quite dramatic.
I didn't even look at it. I didn't care to look at it. I just wanted to know what the verdict was. And I read each and every single line, and with each one I was like, justice is served, justice is served. All the way to the last, to the court, the cost order. I really felt like that was justice for our residents. So it felt really good. And then, of course, I had to get ready. I had a whole diary, which was part of the Fight Back campaign, which we had to then change around because now the focus had changed, and my phone was ringing off the hook, and suddenly I was mayor again, and again, you don't get time to process. You must get into the position to start moving. So that evening we had a mayoral committee meeting.
Well, at least you know that we are real people, because we invited you when you weren't mayor. And now you are mayor. So we were like, okay.
I'm so grateful for that. And, you get to see who's who in your life, even in your workspace. So there's people who relate to the office, and there's people who relate to Mpo. And I think the last 3 weeks was defining for a lot of relationships. So
now you get to actually be back in office, but know that, which is useful.
Yeah.
On the judgment, it's an interesting judgment, and I think many people have assumed, well, it's just a procedural thing, but it seems to me it goes deeper than that, and it has quite wide-ranging implications on 2024, for example. I know there's a political battle, but what do you think is the significance of this judgment for the intersection between law and politics?
I think that a lot of politicians take the fact that we operate within a legal framework for granted. I think a lot of times we overlook a lot of wrong that happens in our council meetings, for instance, and nobody really stands up and acts. So if you look at how my Fight Back campaign was taken by people, it wasn't appreciated by many people. In fact, I was labeled desperate. I'm hanging on to power. I don't want to let go of the salary, and so on. All kinds of negative things where you would expect more positive vibes around the fact that actually somebody is actually saying, no, this is not going to happen, and we're going to stand up and fight. So this for me says, and we had council yesterday, interesting, and even though it wasn't perfect, you could see with the speaker's conduct yesterday that the court judgment has had an impact on how she conducts the business of council. She now knows she's not going to get away with...
Can I just ask, what was that moment like with the speaker who's obviously broken away? She's still presiding. You're now the mayor. I watched that and I was like, you just can't script South African politics sometimes.
I know.
Did you speak to her? Did you have any interaction?
Unfortunately, not yesterday, because she came in through the back, through her lounge into the speaker's chair. But I have to respect her seat. and so there's protocols around council and around how we behave around the speaker, and I have to respect that. It doesn't matter what happened. She is the Speaker of Council, and the good thing with her election is that it was done procedurally, so she is the Speaker, and none of us can object to that, and we have to honor the role and the office and treat it with the dignity that it deserves.
And sorry, you were also still saying about the council and seeing the impact of the court judgment on the way that the proceedings have happened. So you think that that's kind of had a subconscious or even a conscious impact in the way council's working?
I think conscious more than subconscious, because you can see even with the motion that they're bringing now that they are calculating, the notice towards the programming meeting, the notice towards the council meeting. It hasn't been called yet. So you can see they're now observing the rules. And for me, that's the real victory, is that we get to exist in an orderly space where law and order is upheld. And that for me is a big, big victory.
And this could matter for 2024, because if the ANC, some of us would say hopefully, is removed from power, this could come back. We could have a national version of what we've seen in Joburg. We could see court cases. We could see someone's the president one day, they're not the president the next. And so this all has quite important national implications.
I worry about that. And, I was chatting to the leader of executive business, MMC Leonard, yesterday. I was going through Twitter, and somebody actually pointed that out, that if this is what's going to happen in 2024, it's really concerning. And I think to some extent you can absorb it at a local level, but I can't imagine a situation where you have a president one day and then for 25 days you have another president and then that other one comes back. I think the impact would be much bigger, and it says that we need to get our ducks in a row as a country and face the reality that the politics of this nation has changed. The laws of the country need to adapt to speak to the current realities. So I've been giving this example a lot. At the last DA mayoral breakaway, we had guests from Denmark, and we had a lady guest speaker who was a former mayor, current deputy mayor. And we got to engage because Denmark has had coalitions forever. And she said something interesting. She said in Denmark, you're not allowed to table a motion of no confidence in a sitting mayor. A mayor has to finish their term. And she even went as far as to say that even if you're sick and you want to resign, you need permission from council to do so. And they reserve the right to refuse. So I found that quite interesting, but it speaks to stability and why they're able to, in spite of the coalition nature of their governments, they're able to see their program of action through. I do think that what's happening now, if the lawmakers are not waking up to the reality that they have to start thinking about what legislation looks like and what sort of support there is for stability at a national and provincial level, I'd be very worried if they're not getting some work done right now.
On this question of the stability of coalitions, you came out recently speaking about a proposal that you had to bring the EFF into some kind of relationship of support to rebuild your government. And it seems that that was rebuffed by FedEx. Is that true? Take us into that big media storm. What's true, what's not true, and help us understand that.
Yeah. So the Democratic Alliance's highest decision-making body is the FedEx. The FedEx is made up of 20-odd mandated decision-makers from different parts of the country. They represent different provinces and so on. So there's fair representation, and the idea is that when a proposal is brought to the FedEx, it's debated upon robustly, and then a decision is made. Now, I made the proposal initially through Helen Zille before I went myself to present to the FedEx, and I think it was on Thursday that she called an emergency FedEx, and I was caught up in other things because there's so much happening all at the same time, so I couldn't be there. But it's also not orthodox for me to attend FedEx. I'm not a member of the FedEx, so ordinarily your provincial leaders and various other leaders would represent whatever proposal that you have, and I think that's not always understood because the fact that I wasn't there was seen by many as some kind of oppression or suppression by DA leadership, when in fact it's standard practice. And so it was taken to the FedEx, and and I got the outcome, I think it's the same day, that unfortunately FedEx did not support the proposal. And I immediately then said, because I'm a fighter, right, I said, well, I hear you, but I'd like to go and speak to them myself, and see if I won't have better luck this time. And so I made the request on Friday, and it finally happened this week sometime, and I went and I presented to the FedEx myself.
Okay.
Again, very unorthodox. I think it's not something that's done every day, that mayors come and make representations, but I certainly think that it's something we should consider going forward.
Yeah.
And so I did, and unfortunately that evening, very late, I got the response that unfortunately they have not changed their minds.
Do you think that's a pity?
Well, the fact that I made the proposal in the first place means that I felt that that's something that could potentially save the city. It's unfortunate that we don't share the view with members of the FedEx, but the FedEx is the highest decision-making body in the party, and we all need to align with FedEx resolutions.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously 2024 is around the corner, and I've been having lots of conversations with my guests about what's going to happen. Let's assume the ANC does lose power. It's quite possible that we could have a DA president, and then it's quite possible that South Africa could have a white man president, and that may be great and wonderful, and we can all sing Kumbaya. But it would be a significant symbolic moment that some people would think is a bit too soon, especially if the DA didn't win a majority. And then I think to myself, well, you are, a prominent DA leader. What if they put you forward, for example? So that's one trajectory I see. But the other trajectory I see is, I sat in this very office interviewing Musi Maimane 2 years ago. And he had this look of frustration, like he was really trying, but it just wasn't landing. So I'm just putting those two scenarios to you. Do you think either one of them is possible?
I think anything is possible. We have our Congress next year, so it's still a bit of a way off. I'm not sure who's going to put their hand up. People must put their hands up and contest in the Congress. I do think John will put his hand up, but I do think that there needs to be other people that put their hand up as well. Let's see who comes out, as the leader of the party taking us into the election. Is South Africa ready, if that's what you're asking? I'm not sure. But here's what I think. From just the time I've spent engaging with voters, residents, if you look at a Chris Pappas, Chris Pappas is well liked by everybody. Chris Pappas is white. You ask yourself, what is it about Chris Pappas that people like? And when I look at Chris, and I love Chris, and I've spent time with him, Chris is relatable. And Chris is invested in black people. So invested, he speaks the language. He probably knows the culture better than myself as a black person. I mean, some of his anecdotes are unbelievable, just the lengths to which he will go to understand, black people in his environment. And I think that trust is a big factor in the politics of today, and I think people can trust a Chris Pappas because it's not about the color of your skin. It's about, do you see me? Do you care about me? Show me, but don't tell me. Show me. I want to see it in your day-to-day lived experience that you are for me and you are with me. And that's what I think it's about. So I don't think it's about race as much as it's about believability and relatability and true investment in diversity.
It'll certainly be an interesting question because we're going to have to choose that scenario possibly, or whether we want this ANC government, which I've been saying for a very long time has betrayed South Africans. And it gets me to thinking of 2024 more broadly because it feels like we may have a similar situation again nationally where if the DA is intent on separating itself from the EFF for understandable reasons, it doesn't want its constituency to think it, it condones the EFF's extreme behavior. Understood. But that could well drive the EFF into the arms of the ANC in 2024. And that scares me too, because we would be sending the message to the ANC if they held on to power that everything you've done is okay. And in fact, we're going to reward you with more power.
Yeah.
And so the DA might be criticized for giving us the ANC again.
I worry about the possibility of an ANC-EFF national government or even provincial government. I worry very much about that. So we need to find a better alternative. And I think what's playing out now is a practical lesson. And whether we're having the conversations or not, I think people are thinking about what does this really, really mean for 2024. And I believe that it's going to shape our behavior between now and then. I think what we're seeing now, we lost Johannesburg. Yes, we got it back through a court order, but we're still faced with a political battle. We lost Ekurhuleni. There's rumors Mkhwanazi City is next, Tshwane is next. So I do think that we're starting to think about, okay, let's be real, what's going on, and what does it mean for 2024, and what sort of concessions do we need to make, or what sort of conversations do we need to have with our constituencies? And I'm getting calls from DA supporters who are saying to me, defy the Democratic Alliance. We're worried. We don't want the ANC back in power. So that for me is also quite interesting, because we're protecting our constituency, yet we're having some of our members saying, don't listen to them, do your own thing. So I do think that we're going to be having lots of tough and crucial conversations in the next few months. Yeah.
Can you help us understand as well how the coalition itself broke apart in Joburg, the coalition that you led? Again, I think sometimes politicians are better political analysts than we who claim to be political analysts. And we had Bongani Baloyi of Action SA on the show last week, and he was saying that, look, maybe the coalition was a bit too rigid around certain questions. He thinks the coalition underestimated Colleen Makubela. He thinks there should have been more flexibility, and he thinks that the coalition could have survived if there was a little bit more flexibility. Do you agree with that, or do you think that maybe you stood on principle, rightly?
I do think we stood on principle rightly. I don't think that you can enter into a marriage without a marriage contract. I think that would be very dangerous. And if you have a marriage contract, I think you need to stick to it, And so I don't think that I get the rigidity versus flexibility argument, and I think there's lots of room to be flexible, and I think we have been where it was reasonable to be. And I always use the example of the city manager recruitment process, where we probably had the best candidate in the country, for Johannesburg, but there were coalition partners who were not happy in Johannesburg about this person being the city manager because of things that were not necessarily true. They thought he's from Cape Town, he must be DA, and so on and so forth, and it was completely false. But these were perceptions, and perceptions needed to be managed to a point of even compromising and letting go of the candidate and allowing Tshwane to bring them on board. That's flexibility, because legally we could have gone ahead. I know there were issues about, but you met with the candidate, and even that we got a legal opinion that actually there was nothing wrong that happened there. Now, but does flexibility mean that you completely ignore provisions of a coalition agreement, in a crisis situation where you're under tremendous pressure? You don't have the luxury of time to think your decision through, think about its impact on the rest of the country, where you may have relationships. We've got relationships with the IFP in KZN, as an example. It's not a simple, straight line type decision. And I respect that the coalition agreement has provision for a review.
Sure.
And the idea was that we should come back to the drawing board and say, okay, what's working, what isn't working, what tweaks do we need to make going forward? And the Democratic Alliance believed that that would be an opportune time to have those discussions, and not in a crisis situation where we've just lost the speaker and we have to now replace the speaker. The Democratic Alliance felt, let's stick to what's in the coalition agreement, and as per the agreement, the speaker position belonged to the Democratic Alliance. And I know there's a whole argument about, but those were elected before the agreement was signed. Yes, they were, but when we negotiated the rest of the positions in the agreement, we bore that in mind. The fact that we already have a DA mayor, speaker, and chief whip, and so we were not going to go for the chair of chairs. We were not going to go for more than 5 MMCs, irrespective of the fact that we had more than 50% of the seats in the coalition. So all of that was calculated into the final coalition agreement, which everybody signed, by the way, and we signed when everyone was satisfied. So we just could not understand how at this time of crisis, we're now suddenly not happy. The DA has too many positions. Why was it not raised when the coalition agreement was put together and signed? And why did you sign? If you had that issue. So, and why not wait for the review to bring those things up, and then we do it properly? So I think flexibility is good, and I think there has been a lot of flexibility. I don't think people realize how much flexibility there is, because we don't talk about the inner workings of the coalition. I don't think we're rigid at all. I personally have given a lot of concessions.
No, thank you for explaining your perspective on it, and it's fascinating. I'm trying to piece together exactly how this all worked, and it's interesting to hear from your side. And I think some of those concessions haven't actually been raised. So, I felt a strange thing when the government, the council and the coalition broke apart, because I live in Joburg. And I have to admit, suddenly potholes that had been there for a long time were being fixed. I saw parts of highways that I'd never seen before that had been weeded, and I didn't even realize there was actually land underneath. And you got a sense that at least someone is trying, despite the backlogs and all of that. So I think you did succeed in demonstrating a commitment to governance, which I got a bit worried when the ANC came back in. And suddenly I'm seeing 1 or 2 potholes, once again. What do you think Joburg actually needs in order to get back on its feet? And what was that process of trying to rebuild, even in a short space of time, like?
Joburg needs commitment. One of the promises I gave to residents is that I will not abandon them, because this is not a short-term project. The kind of backlogs we're dealing with are as old as the time the ANC has been in power. We've seen infrastructure that was neglected, not maintained, no repairs over years, and now our infrastructure backlog is why we're having electricity problems and water outages and so on. And that's the reality. But the reality also is that we're not going to fix it in 1 year, not even in 1 term of office. So you need someone who can be in it for the long haul. Now, I trained as a medical doctor, and my favorite place to be in a hospital setting was casualty. I liked it because it gives you immediate outcomes. You have somebody in hypoglycemia, you give them glucose, and suddenly they're alive. And they came in, they were unconscious. And then I moved from clinical medicine to public health medicine. Public health medicine is public administration with a focus on health care. And one of the first things we were told is that some of the things you're going to implement, you will not see the results, because you've moved away from clinical medicine. You've moved into a space where you may develop a policy today whose impact will only be seen by your children or maybe their children.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of outlook you need for where Joburg is now. Unfortunately, our residents don't always understand, but I get that they're frustrated. They're angry. They've been done in for far too long. And that's why communication with residents is so important. I've found that each time I've had a public meeting and I've explained to people in very simple terms, our infrastructure backlog is 300 billion. Our capital budget for this year is 7.7 billion. Suddenly you get that aha moment. They get it. And they're a lot more sympathetic and more supportive, less abusive, and you suddenly have a team that's moving with you and they're taking responsibility. What can we do to help? Can we keep our streets clean? Can we join sabc the cleanup campaign once a month? You build a community of builders who are working together to repair a city. You don't need politicians who are focusing on tenders, contracts, cater deployment, and all those things. That's not what Johannesburg needs right now. Joburg is broken. It's broken and it needs to be fixed. And it's not going to be a 1 day, 1 year, 1 term of office job. You need patience and you need somebody who's in it for the long haul.
Dr. Palatse, the current and potentially future mayor of Joburg, thank you very much for joining our audience on SMWX.
Thank you.
Aye.